Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about when you hit the wall, when you fall down, when you need help. After a hospitalization, an illness, a change of life, perhaps a change of lifestyle, or maybe you're just saying, I just can't do it anymore. Who is out there? Family, friends, your tribe, perhaps no one. What do you do then? And even so, what is the help you are seeking? Is it something outside of yourself? I need a meal, or perhaps I need a hug. Maybe I need to be comforted. Maybe I need to feel love. And then is it an outside job or an inside job? Today my guest is Ken Saik. His book is Helping Hands, Companion of Baggage Burdens. It's an entire book of the conversation of his character in which they discuss what are the questions, what are the implications, are there possibly different exits off that highway in which I could see something different. Maybe I could reflect on what I'm saying, feeling, where I've been, and where I am now. All of these choices are really what comes up to us in life when we do hit that wall, and especially if we're an elder. We can't avoid it. It's all out there. And sometimes we say, I'm just going to deny it, put up those blinders. Well, how is your world really being a fulfilled life? Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you here, Ken, to talk about this, because I think that so many times people will say, I've got an agenda, I put everything in place, and I know my world's going to play out like this. And all of a sudden it goes, woof, where did that go? What happened? Do you think perhaps people find that adventure?
Oh, I'm sure. You get the phrase, a curved ball thrown at you, and then you've got to try and readjust. And sometimes out goes your agenda, or you have to modify it somewhat. And sometimes it's not comforting.
Yeah. Sometimes the agenda is in a different language, and you can't even understand it because you haven't opened yourself up, don't you think?
That's for certain. You don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing, so you're going on your own little path, which is, we'll call it the long way around.
Yeah. You know, our paths sometimes are so limited. You know, I work so much with elders, end of life, after a disease, an illness, or hospitalization. And I had this story at one time that we had shared it's probably 12 years now on the radio. And we said there was a woman, she was in the hospital. She allowed me to share her story. And she said, my daughter came in and said, you know, how are you doing? What's up? Blah, blah. And they kind of chit-chatted for a moment. And she said, are you hungry? And the woman said, yes, I'm hungry. She said, oh, I know just what you want, and I'll go get it. And she came back with this fried chicken, big box, steaming hot, all ready to go. And the woman in the bed gently said, thank you so much, dear. I'll eat it later. The daughter couldn't figure out what's going on and said, okay, maybe she's going to eat it later. And the woman in the bed said to me, she said, you know, I didn't have my teeth in because they're broken and I can't wear them anymore. She didn't even ask me what I had wanted. And maybe it was what she had a memory of me before that I may have wanted. Don't you think all three of those topics is something you've touched on in your book?
Certainly, especially that idea of going to someone and saying, what is it you want? I mean, when you gave me that description, that would have been my first interruption. Ask her what it is that she wants. Now you know what you're going to do.
Yeah. I think also, too, the idea of who are we to our family and tribe around us? Because there's a lot of old memories there. Sometimes when something happens to us, we consistently go back to the first memory. I remember she liked this, or I remember we went there, or I remember this is the way she wants it fixed. And we always go back to those. What happens when we go back to those, just as your character did, replaying old tapes, per se?
Well, it can be quite limiting. I mean, I look at Jill's eldest son, and he remembers his mother as being someone who was very restrictive, who was very self-centered. It was all about her. And so later on in his life, that's the image he carries about her, and so he's not overly pleasant to her. And she has to overcome that, but she doesn't even know what it is that she thinks she's done. So, yeah, where do you go with that? And so her point was, I don't know what it is that I've done, but, I'd like to kind of start again and be forgiven. Are you willing to open up? And so you got to start with that kind of humbleness that says, I don't know, but I want to do some healing. Yeah. That was tough for her, too, because in her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong either. So it's a willingness to explore the area that you didn't want to explore in the first place.
You know what I also, too, Ken, I've had an entire life, 7 decades almost, of violence, abuse, and all that other stuff. And people, when I would share my story, they would say, I'm so sorry for your suffering. And I had said to them, I don't understand what you mean. I had to look up on my iPhone a few years ago, define suffering, what is it? Because I don't carry the baggage of wherever I've been, what I've done, or whatever. And I don't live, have that checklist of regrets, guilt, shame, and all those other words. But I think many people do. And when they find themselves in that space and time, it's like, oh gosh, now I have to hurry up and unravel this, or else I have to, when I'm ready to pass on, take all of this stuff with me. Do you think sometimes our stuff becomes like this smoldering little patch that we can either go around, deny, or we're just like sitting there saying, oh, this is just too much for me?
Well, it's interesting you focus on suffering, because I'm thinking from Jill's standpoint, she would never have said that she was suffering. I mean, she had limitations and what she would do, but she wouldn't have said she was suffering, because she was a woman who, when I decide what I'm going to do it, and I can, and that's who I am. So that was her image. So to say that she was suffering is no, but the bottom of the line is, because of the abuse that she had when she was a child, she carried it with her, and it really meant, hey, I really don't trust men. I don't trust men who smoke. I don't trust men with beards. Right. That's what my father was like, and I cannot get over that. But, she didn't see it as suffering.
Right, yeah, and see, I never saw it as suffering either, but I think that is a lot of conversation that people around us might reflect back to us. Do you know what I mean? Like people coming to visit or people trying to help, and it's almost as if it's their story that they're feeling that they need to work through. Maybe?
In some cases, you could say that. I'm just thinking from the standpoint of Jill's husband when she married him. He had a totally different concept of who she was and what her role was, and she had a totally different one than his, and they just didn't match. And so, there was no serious kind of communication and appreciation of each other, but they could still accompany each other in life.
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of people say that they go through life and they have a lot of disharmonic kind of times. There's a lot of resistance, a lot of push and pull. Well, you didn't come to my side, you didn't do this for me, you didn't do that for me kind of idea. And then when something hits, it's sort of like, well, who am I going to rely on now? That kind of idea. However, if you can see people for who they are, understand that everybody has their own human story. Perhaps, we use the word forgiveness because we believe it needs to be such big and monumental. And perhaps maybe it's just acceptance that they're doing the best in their life just as well as you are. Maybe?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a matter of saying, okay, so where were you coming from? If you can understand where they're coming from, it's the understanding that says acceptable. But if you don't proceed to try and grasp the understanding, then you proceed with your own misperception, and misperceptions usually end up cutting people rather than building them up.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting with a lot of grandchildren and children now. They really have not had the experiences a lot of us maybe that have had over the age of, I would say, 55, 60. Because our parents and our grandparents all used to live, I know for myself, they all lived within a mile of each other. Yet one grandmother never, ever set foot in the other grandmother's house, you know, her entire life. And they both lived to be 100, you know. And we look back on times and we say, that was post-war. Most of them knew of violence. They knew of people coming back, telling the stories of killing people. They also knew about the Depression, not having money, not being able to feed themselves, having one pair of shoes, you know, for a whole year or until they really couldn't wear them anymore. I know for myself, in the 60s when I was growing up, we had one pair of shoes a year. That was it. You know, here's your school shoes, go wear them. But, you know, and now we couldn't even conceive of that. However, that's about understanding where people are coming from, you know. Most of my elders all worked in the mines, you know. Many of the men died young. The women didn't work, so they lived to a ripe old age. So if we can share these stories and understand, it's not about taking them on as, kind of like heavy, burdensome story that we have to make amends somehow in the world out there. But we just have to say, I thank you for being in my life, sharing your story, and I honor your being. Because it's as simple as that. Yet we get so wrapped up in, it's almost like we want to play out a movie. Oh, I saw this movie and that must be how it's going to be. When really it just can be as simple as those words. Do you think that's a start?
It is. I guess that's kind of the thinking I had when I was doing the writing in my book. You talk about post-war. I just look at, I'm thinking of color in the past. Parents who were raising their children, one of the key things was do as you're told. Be obedient. Right. This is how you do things. And with obedience comes discipline, and sometimes the discipline is kind of harsh. And, okay, so how come you keep doing that same thing? This is what was done before. This is why they was done before. And they've gotten into that habit without seeing that there was an alternative way of raising children.
Right.
Now, unless you know that this is the way they were brought up and how they came, and they were just doing the best that they could under their own circumstances.
Right.
And once you have that appreciation, then you can say, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. I don't agree with it, but I can understand where you're coming from. You're okay.
Right.
And it's that whole conclusion. You're okay. That's important.
That's so vitally important. And, you know, also, too, I can look at it that humanity has taken a great leap, you know, with the Internet. Because if you looked at it before, there was a little time, I mean, in our area, a small library. It had old books. We kind of believed it as gospel. You know, everybody only knew what they knew. It wasn't like that they knew what was going on in another city or town, because they only knew what they knew from 2 miles away. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then here comes the Internet, and it says you can Google in there how to raise your child, and you can get 20 million answers, you know, whereas before it was just 1 or 2 books in the library. So now we've given us, as humans, this exponential way of saying, I can go on a vacation there. I didn't know there was an ocean. None of my relatives in the earlier years have ever seen an ocean, you know. And we look back and we say, but I don't understand it. And the answer is you're not supposed to understand it. You're just supposed to say thank you. I think the idea is that we're pushing ourselves in many generations to try to, quote, understand, like jump, you know, that whole thing, walk a mile in my shoes. You don't need to walk a mile in my shoes, but you need to just say thank you and understand in just somewhere in little space and time. In other words, you don't need to understand it as you have to carry the pain and the suffering or whatever that might be there. You know? You know how sometimes they'll tell a story and they'll say, well, patients will come to me and they'll say, well, I have diabetes. And it's like, awesome. And they'll say, what? I'll say, awesome. You've been seeking something all of your life. You have a name on it. Let's go on the journey. Now what? But yet others will say, I have it. And they lead with that as if that is who they are. And they're not. That's their experience. Perhaps?
Yeah, I guess it's important to know who you are. And it's not an illness, and it's not what other people think you are. You have to know who you are in your first place. And then what they think and what they do is not as relevant because you have a peace of mind about what and where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what I loved about your book, Ken? Your character, Jill, she takes us along all of these journeys and these questions that we just talked about. Everything I've shared and you've shared is in this book. It's, oh, I see that. Now something's coming up from the past. Oh, what kind of questions would I ask? Or people she would have a conversation with in her home, her children. All of these questions are what people are thinking about, yet sometimes they're afraid to voice it. Because they will say, oh, well, I shouldn't say that because my daughter will have this, she might not talk to me again, or maybe they won't come around again, or, oh, goodness, well, I don't want to say that because I might be telling a secret, and, oh, hey, you and I probably both know how many secrets we've got that we could share, right? And it's sort of like, don't ever talk about those secrets. The story of, you have a nice house on the outside, but what goes on inside these four walls could be hell on wheels, And I think that's very important because those secrets, those questions, and those answers is an opening exchange between people. Do you think that perhaps your book, Helping Hands, is truly helping hearts open up? It's not just I'm going to go out and get your groceries, make your food, and be able to take you where you got to go. It's I'm going to bring food in that you might enjoy. Can we eat a meal together? I'm going to be able to take you to someplace that you need to go so you won't have fear about getting there. So it's opening hearts more?
It is. And opening hearts is another way of saying I trust you. I think I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to trust you. Jill did that once when Bill says to her, you do trust me, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't.
Right.
And she actually ended up having to tell him, you think I'm really going to trust you when you betrayed me? You sided with my husband when he wanted to divorce me?
Right.
Okay, that's the misunderstanding she got from her husband, and that was causing her to say, I don't think I want to trust you. But the key in allowing that trust from her was she had so many experiences with Bill that said, he's accepting me. He's accepting me. Even though I was mean, even though I slighted him, he's still accepting me. And for her, that meant maybe I can take a chance and tell him I think he's a jerk.
Right.
And then she found out the truth. And when she found out the truth, that strengthened her relationship and strengthened her trust. But it took that willingness to be open and say, what is he really like? Mm-hmm. And that's the risk you take when you want to kind of show a love, but you're afraid that you're going to get bitten in the process.
I think it's also, too, about defining what love is, because we're not saying love is romantic, love is blah, 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 whatever it is you think it is. It's saying I can have unconditional love for someone, but I still don't have to be tethered to them. I don't have to engage with them if I don't want to. I can just see them as a human being doing their life story. I have 2 ex-husbands, and I still speak to them on occasion, maybe once every few years, if I, want to or need to. But the idea is that awesome. We had our experiences, we had our life story, You're on to your other one. I'm on to my next one. And to be okay with that, I think Jill needs to be okay with it no matter what comes up her way. Perhaps?
Yeah, I guess that's one of the key themes in Helping Hands is to explore what is love. There are so many different ways that are being presented to her so that she gets a better description of it. I mean, her mother, who she thought didn't love her, she finds out loved her, but even worse, loved her husband, who was a drunk and who was abusive.
Right.
I mean, there was a whole different expression of love there. But then when she talked to her grandmother, she found out from her grandmother, this is what love is.
Right.
She hadn't really recognized it. And she was being loved. She hadn't recognized that either. It was the experience that was denied her when she was a child, so she never really had a clear grasp of that. And it took for her a lifetime to be able to find out.
Yeah. I think sometimes the idea of love is, what are they going to do for me? How are they going to fill that hole deep inside my gut? And am I going to be able to make sure that they do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they do it exactly as I wrote it down? You see on all of these movies, with the women with their little checklist and all that other stuff. Well, you pretty much have set yourself up to be able to have a failure because it just doesn't work that way, And I think if you flip it around and say, what can I just do and let go of, then you kind of have a pretty good end of life. Because, as I share with a lot of my patients at end of life, honey, if you're going through this little tiny door, if you think you can carry all that baggage with you, that's a thought you're going to have until you get to the door. But it doesn't work. It does not go with you. And I think if we can clearly understand that, we say, what am I holding on to so dearly that I'm afraid of that others might judge me? Right there, that sentence is your whole book, right?
Yeah. For example, to me, when I look at the grandmother talking to Jill, and she was talking about being a loving wife, her point was, what is it that he wants? What would make him happy? You look at what you can do for someone else, not what you would get out of it. That's not the whole point of it. And for her, that was a bit of an eye-opener. That wasn't the way she was used to thinking. For her, you don't have love. What you have is somebody does something for you, and then you've got to do something back. Otherwise, you owe them, and then you're in debt, and you're under their control.
Right. Well, that's conditional love, then. Who wants conditional love? It's the same thing as...
No, that's right.
Right. I mean, who wants that?
It's like doing a contract or something.
You constantly feel like you're pushing and pulling. I can remember I was the first one out of our entire lineage that ever got a divorce. It's because all of my ancestors in my line stayed with their spouses, no matter how bad they were. And they were pretty bad. They were, on a scale of 1 to 10, they were a 50. They were pretty bad. So I can distinctly remember one of my relatives had said to me, gosh, why did what happened to you? What was the problem? He's such a great guy. Look at how awesome he is. And I would just be able to turn it around, the first few years after it. I was like questioning myself. But after that, I said, you know what? No, not going to go there. That has nothing to do with me. If you like to see it that way, then you go ahead. And I lost quite a few relatives. They didn't bother with me anymore, because I was like, she's a crazy one. She's got the whatever, and let's see what she does next kind of idea. And I just simply trotted along in my life, But it pretty much was the idea is that I chose to not be what I saw so much repeated in front of me. I said, that's not my choice. I'm just, I see it, what y'all are doing, but it isn't my choice. And I was willing to risk having everything in my life blow up. And boy, did it blow up. It blew up a couple times, But I took the risk every single time. And every single time, I had to have faith in something. You either had to have faith in God, your source energy, your spiritual guides, whatever it is. But I think the word is faith. Faith comes along with the word unconditional love. You have faith in something inside of you that is steering your rudder, so to speak. And don't you think that Jill had to find that faith in herself that steered her rudder?
Well, partly because she had a bit of faith in herself that I can do whatever I decide I'm going to do. But the reality came across that, hey, this isn't the case. That's not the way things are. But I mean, when I take a look at this and I say from the standpoint of love and from the standpoint of faith, one of the things that Bill tried to get across to her is that God loves you. He loves you as you are. As a matter of fact, He loves you all that whole time that you ignored your grandmother. Your grandmother still loves you, even though you ignored her all the time. You ran away from her when she was trying to help you. There is what love is. It's long-lasting, and it's there for you, and I'll be there for you when you're ready. And that's the same thing with respect to God, and that's something that she had to come up to a whole new realization, because as she told Bill, when you talk about God and you talk about Him as Father, hey, I got to tell you, Father's got a whole different meaning for me. It just doesn't wash.
Right. Absolutely. Hold on. I think, too, the idea that there's many generations living, within proximity to each other, and we're all interacting. And each one comes along with its own sets of the past, its own stories, or its own experiences. And we can't say, to my grandchild, she's like, oh, I'm going to ride my bike. She gets on it. She just charges right out in the road, and oh, my gosh, you would have thought I'm going to explode, because I'm going, I can't believe you just did that. And, I think we can't take our own experiences or our own dogma or whatever it is and always want to overshadow and make an imprint book and then hand it to the next generation. So I think really what we're at is in the year 2023, I've seen it the past several years, we're at a kind of like precipice point where the elders are no longer sharing their old stories because they're learning more from the young. And they're saying, I think I'm going to do something differently. I don't want to do that anymore. It's not in my wheelhouse anymore. So people are lightening up a little more. They're letting things go. Even my daughter, she gave me this book, and it says Grandma Stories in Grandma's Life, about Grandma's life. You go through it and you write all these things about, how you grew up and your life and all that. I said, Krista, I'm not gonna fill that out. She says, why? I said, because my life was a shipwreck. She says, well, don't they want to know that? I said, no. I want to share with them today, and they can remember today. So this summer, the grandkids and I are each going to make a book about our summer. And my one granddaughter, she's 5 years old, she says, can we send it to the publisher? I said, yeah, we're going to send it, to the printer. We're going to send it to the publisher, and we're going to get a hardcover book that comes back. And she says, awesome. Then we'll have a summer book. I said, yep. That's what we're going to do. But to remember more of that, I think we now have an opportunity to be able to say, let's be better humans going forward and let some of that old stuff go away. Maybe?
Certainly creating new memories together is a treasure, particularly for those who are young and they're treasuring the experience. But to say that experiences from the past lack the elements of attractiveness, of love, of sacrifice, of things that you've done for others because you wanted to make their life better, those happen too. And those are experiences and stories that are worthy of sharing as well, to say, this is who we are as people. And there's good stuff about us too, then, as well as now.
Right.
So the old stories are good too. Matter of fact, from a standpoint of, if you want to call it the standpoint of saving a culture, and because my background is of Ukrainian, that is one of the ways that the Ukrainian culture was able to be saved. is that even though it was non-existent as far as the authorities were concerned, it was existent in the homes because the mothers and the fathers had often said, this is what we did, this is how we did it, this is why we did it, and this is what we are doing, and this is why, because this is who we are. And in that way, they saved their culture by retaining those stories of the past.
You know, it's so funny you said that, because every single year on Thanksgiving, I always make this stuffing. It is the most unhealthiest thing in God's green earth. It's rice cooked with milk, onions and garlic cooked in half of a can of Crisco, and and then potatoes that are finely grated. And you put it all together in this big turkey pan, because I'm Lithuanian and Polish. And, you know, talk about dirt down poor. We grew up dirt down poor our entire life. And I mean, still to this day, I cook this meal on Thanksgiving. And, you know, and it's like, oh, gosh. And then, you know, every year I always forget something. It's so funny because like this got like 10 ingredients. How could you forget something? But every year you forget something. And but what it brings about is a conversation in your thoughts with your elders. Oh, darn it. See, Aunt Carol, I always forget this, and you were supposed to remind me. Or, oh, you know, yeah, Grandma always did that way. She always forgot something too. But it brings about those stories and reflection. However, it doesn't bring the dead weight of the dread. It brings about light reflection, you know. So it's really shifting the stories so they don't carry the emphasis of that other energy. It brings a lightness to the story. Now, I didn't make the stuffing this year. It was like my stomach just couldn't handle it. I had a year of it was like, I just don't think so. You know what I mean? I'm just not going to go there. And, you know, the kids aren't around anymore. You know, they're not here. So it's sort of like, well, am I going to eat this whole turkey pan full of this stuff? I don't think so. So, you know, and it was just interesting. It was just like, but, you know, so now I just set out a coffee cup with the cookies that I make that I used to make with my other relatives, you know, and, you know, I just do that. But I think the idea is that that's truly about having unconditional love. That's not having conditional love again. So if we can see that when we are helping others, when they are sick or they are ill or they've had an event that sets them back, try to be able to create something new and say, let's enjoy this. How about this today? You know, and see where it takes you. It may take you on another journey with them in the first place, perhaps.
Yep, for sure. That's the whole idea of saying, let's kind of do something different. Let's if you want to say, look at the positive part of life so that I can enjoy that part. Deal with what you have to deal with, but look forward to something that's more enjoyable and something we can do together that we'll look back on with smiles later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. You know, I was going to have my grandkids. We were going to go out and I was going to do it last weekend, but we forgot. But I wanted them to pick up all the little sticks in the yard, you know. And I showed them a picture on the Internet where you take the sticks and you paint them and you make them in the shape of a heart and then you hang it on the wall. So I think the idea is that how can we create from nature? How can we create from our own creativity, get some paints, do this, that, or the other, you know, and to make something that they will say, oh, you know, I remember that experience. And that was joyful, you know, to at the end of life, which I work so much with. I live in New Orleans. Here, death is just a merely open the door and you pass through, and we celebrate life. So my client, you know, at the time, it was time for her to pass on. Her house was filled with balloons, I mean packed. Party favors everywhere, cake, champagne, all the people in her home, all dressed up in bright colors and their party hats and everything, at 2 o'clock in the morning to usher her out of this world. And that was awesome for her. It was just exactly what she wanted. So I think the idea is, are we open to say, I don't want to do it the old way. Can I have it a different way? But also to share that story with others, because they're never going to know it if you keep it inside. Like Jill, she started to share those stories about maybe I would like this or that or the other, and perhaps that other doesn't fit anymore, is really where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, yeah. That's just the whole idea that she was going to go back to see her grandmother, something that she was never going to do before because Ontario was just not a safe place.
Right.
I'm actually going to go back because my grandmother was just something terrific. I've got to go back because she's just that kind of person. And she was. But the thing is, you have to be willing to say, I'm going to take the chance. There's a rough road somewhere up ahead. I know it's rough, but the reward at the end is really worth it, and it's going to be something I'm going to try. What was good is that she actually had someone who was willing to walk with her in case she had troubles. And so, hey, I think I can do this. And that's the key. I can do this now. And when you have someone you know that you're with who can help you do it, then that strengthens you. And I think that's really important to know that you've got people who can go with you where you need and want to go so you can actually get there and have a rewarding experience.
Let's also, too, in closing, talk about the idea is that when you do walk through these things, you may choose to let them go and not revisit them again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you may not want to go back to those relatives. You may let other people go. You may let experiences go. Some people say, I don't want therapies and treatments, and they let it go. There's a lot of letting go. Once you start doing that letting go, I find that people have miracles, so to speak. They can breathe better. They feel better, even if it's only for a day or an hour or maybe years. Perhaps maybe that's the gift of life, is being able to see that there's more of a cycle, and if you let go, that it's just a breath away for something different.
It gives you a little bit of freedom. It unloads the baggage that you've been carrying so you can then do other things. Yeah.
You know, it's so funny, Ken. If you look back at it, in the 60s and 70s, you know, women started carrying those big bags, you know, like the sack bags. Then if we look at it in the 90s and 2000, women started carrying the pulley suitcases because they had too much stuff to carry. And, you know, and now if you look at it, I mean, for myself, my purse is no bigger than my cell phone. It carries one card and my cell phone. And we look at it, wow, how much baggage have we let go? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And because all of this stuff we thought was so vitally important to our existence, our appearance, our outward expression, or the way in which we engage, we had to have all of these ... We just don't anymore.
And I guess the question is, how and why do you get to that point? And part of it has a basis in knowing who you are, and you're comfortable with it. You have to be comfortable with who you are. But the other part is seeing that comfort being reflected by those who are close to you. They're accepting you as who you are. You're not somebody who is a problem, who's a burden.
Right.
You're someone who's also a joy. And when you've got those things working for you, and then, you know, and that was Bill's point as well, and when you see that the Lord's got the same kind of perception about you as well, then all around, things are going to be good. You can count on things being good. Oh, rough road, yes, but in the end, things can still be good.
Right. You know, I always share with others is that sometimes when you really get to that point, you might be alone. You might not have anyone around. You may not have those people that are in that space and time or ready in awareness. And I will say that your best response when someone says, what do you need? You say, a safe place to land. And if you just say, I need a safe place to land, I think something in God's world is going to trigger, and they will understand. And maybe they will freeze in their tracks, and they will stop running their own agendas, and they will listen. And right then and there is exactly what you need, or perhaps what they need, to be able to assist. Do you think?
Yeah, and for Jill, she had a lot of safe places to land, and as she recognized them, her grandmother, her sister, Bill. She even began to recognize that God was a safe place to land.
Right.
Those are all new revelations. Now you can start going forward and creating a new life for yourself because you know things are going to be okay in the end.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Ken, it was such a pleasure to dance with you in the ethers today, so to speak. We kind of danced through your book, a lot of the questions that Jill brings up, a lot of the experiences she has, and how others engage and interact with her. I think it's exactly what people are going through these days, and it's to not be afraid to answer the questions or to ask others and get in those confrontations, kind of be the what stirrer, kind of like let yourself be vulnerable. Maybe that's what we all need to experience.
Well, seeking truth certainly is a way of clearing the air, because then you get to know where everybody's coming from, and if you can follow that up with an acceptance, not necessarily that I agree with you, but I accept and understand where you're coming from, and then you've got a chance to be able to build on relationships.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Ken, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
You say that again?
Can you share with the listeners how to, do you have a website or anything?
Yes, I do. It's author Ken Saik, www.authorkensaik.com. And there I've got a lot of other books in there. It's interesting that you talk about working with people who are in their end part of life. One of the books I've got is called In the End, 12 teenagers who are facing death. They have literally plunged into a sinkhole, and they've scrambled into a tunnel of a mine tunnel, and now they're trying to be able to get home, and they're finding out that it's awfully difficult, and people are actually not making it. And how do you survive in that kind of environment? And so the whole point is, okay, what is it that you can look forward to? And I don't want to give away what the end is, but the end is, in the end, it is, according to reviewers, surprising. They get quite a shock that this is where we're going with this. It's meant to be an eye-opener, and I think it is. It means that in your end life, you can still look forward to something, as you said, a safe place to land. Right.
Absolutely. Ken, it was such a pleasure to have you with us to talk about this, because so many people are afraid of being able to, of losing people, of confronting people, of, having anger. So many of the elders don't want to have a confrontational conversation at end of life, because they said, I grew up with that, that's how I've lived my whole life, and I'm done with it. But yet sometimes we have to say, let's just push that button and be done with it, and when you push the button, I think sometimes you might be surprised, right?
Yeah, you get revelations you hadn't expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you, and perhaps we'll have you on another time about your other works.
Oh, thank you very much. I enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you. If you'd like more information about Ken Saik, again, his book is Helping Hands, Companion of Baggage Burdens. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information and find out about his other books also. And it's also about being able to say, I trust in myself. I know who I am. I'm just this person that has a heart that beats, and I'm going to be okay. I know I'm going to be okay. I was put here to be okay. Someone's got my back. It can be God. It could be angels. It could be the person just sitting next to you on the bus. You're going to be okay. So just allow yourself the freedom to say, I need help. I need a soft place to land. And whatever comes, I will be okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.